Hello, I'm Jonathan from Boom Instructor Training, and in this video I will be analysing some more examiner feedback so you can learn from someone else's mistake. And this PDI failed the Part 3 test and their pupil was a full licence holder. So this is quite an interesting analysis that I will be doing. Let's have a look at the examiner feedback. So the lesson and lesson theme, well, the student was a full licence holder and the theme was effective use of mirrors. Feedback from the examiner. Lesson planned on mirrors, changed to approach speed, then back to mirrors. Very little learning taking place today due to incorrect level of instruction. Despite it being evident the pupil shown good mirrors skills when speeding up and slowing down, you still continued to go back to this subject. Despite the pupil missing 2 speed sign changes, you then went to identify all speed changes and then asking him about the sign on the last occasion. Not enough evidence to know if learning has taken place. The pupil would have benefited from a lesson on planning, as this is where his weakness was in both identifying speed changes and traffic light changes. Be mindful not to treat him like a learner, especially when the corners are not sharp. 10 to 50 miles per hour for a full licence holder with good control could be too slow. Okay, so let's unpick this feedback sentence by sentence. Firstly, the examiner says the lesson plan was use of mirrors, but then as the lesson commenced, the PDI adapted the lesson plan, decided to pause the use of mirrors lesson plan. Let's just pause this lesson plan because I now want to focus on approach speed. So the PDI had noticed that the full licence holder pupil, that their approach speed to junctions, approach speed to hazards was too fast. So the PDI thought, okay, let's now focus on this. But then after a short period of time, the PDI then decided to shift the focus of the lesson back to use of mirrors. So the PDI would have said something like, okay, you seem to be doing well now with your approach speed to junctions and hazards. That seems to have improved. I don't know how the PDI handled this. I don't know. I'm only going on the feedback. But clearly the PDI then shifted the focus of the lesson back to use of mirrors. However, moving on to the second paragraph, the examiner says that very little learning happened throughout the lesson, in part due to the incorrect level of instruction. And this would have been over instruction. The PDI was telling the pupil what to do rather than asking the pupil, by asking proactive questions to encourage the pupil to think for themselves, work it out for themselves, well-timed proactive questions. But rather than doing that, the PDI was telling this full licence holder what to do. This is an experienced full licence holder. They're a really good driver. You don't need to be treating them like a novice learner driver. This was a big mistake that this PDI made. The examiner says that it was quite clear that the pupil actually had very good mirror skills. Actually, the pupil was very competent at using their mirrors before speeding up and before slowing down. But even so, the PDI decided to go back to this subject, use of mirrors. Why? There's no point, was there? Because if, whether it's a learner driver or whether you're teaching a full license holder, if they are clearly competent at checking the mirrors before changing speed, before changing direction, checking the mirrors regularly to keep up to date with what's happening to the rear, if your pupil is really good at doing this, why would you build a lesson around something that the pupil can already do? It doesn't make any sense. Now, why would a PDI do this? Well, I would suggest, and again, I wasn't there, so I can't say for certain, but I'm just basing it on my extensive experience. I would just say it's a lack of awareness of the pupil's actions. I'm going to have a guess here. I'm going to have a little guess. And I would imagine, again, based on my experience, that maybe on the last lesson, okay, the previous lesson, the lesson before this part 3 test, this full license holder pupil, because I would imagine that the PDI would have taken them out initially for an observation drive to get a feel for their standard of driving, look for any driving weaknesses, look for any bad driving habits that need to be overcome. And maybe on the previous lesson, the PDI noticed that the full license holder pupil missed a couple of mirrors checks. Okay, so this PDI went, okay, I've noticed that there's a couple of mirrors checks here. I'm going to jump on that, and we're going to do that for my part 3 test. That's going to be the focus of the lesson, to improve your use of mirrors. And I would imagine, again, I can only speculate here, but I can imagine that the PDI and this full license holder would have had a chat before the part 3 test started, and the PDI would have said, look, I noticed on the last lesson that you missed a few mirrors checks. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to kind of help you to make sure that you check the mirrors before you change speed, before you change direction. And the full license holder would have gone, okay, that's fine, I'm happy to do that. Now, this is an experienced full license holder, so this experienced full license holder would have thought to themselves, it's been brought to my attention that I've missed a few mirrors checks. I'm going to really do my best now to make sure that I check my mirrors, because this is like a test situation. There's an examiner sat in the back. It's been brought to my attention that I've been missing a few mirrors checks. So then the part 3 test starts, and this very switched on, experienced, capable full license holder is aware that they need to improve their use of mirrors. So they're just making a real effort to do this. Okay, I need to reduce the speed, mirrors, I need to speed up, mirrors, I need to change direction, mirrors. So therefore this full license holder kind of, if there was a slight weakness in use of mirrors, once it was brought to their attention, they just self-corrected it. And therefore, as the wheel started moving on this part 3 test, it should have been obvious that actually the PDI originally thought there was a bit of an issue with use of mirrors, but actually there isn't, because once you've noticed, because you're observing your pupil's eyes, then once you've noticed that the pupil is, okay, yeah, I can see that you are checking the mirrors correctly when it's necessary to do so, then this is no longer a valid lesson plan. So it was right, actually, for this PDI to adapt to this and change the lesson plan to approach speed, because this full license holder pupil was, by the sounds of it, leaving their braking too late and approaching junctions, approaching hazards too fast. But for some unknown reason, the PDI decided to go back to use of mirrors, and it just doesn't make any sense. But I would suggest that the reason why is because the PDI wasn't aware of the pupil's actions, and this is a risk management problem. That's one of the risk management competences. Was the trainer aware of the surroundings and the pupil's actions? And on this occasion, I would say no. I would say there was just a basic lack of awareness. Because if you're watching your pupils, their eyes, their head, their hands, their feet, you're aware of the surroundings, then you can see whether the pupil is or isn't checking the mirrors. And on this occasion, the pupil was. So there was no reason to go back to this use of mirrors lesson plan because it was pointless. Nothing could be achieved because the pupil's already good at use of mirrors. But then the examiner says that the pupil missed 2 speed sign changes. So there was a couple of occasions throughout the drive where the pupil just missed a change of speed limit, whether that's reducing the speed or increasing the speed limit. But the pupil missed a couple of speed limit changes. But what the PDI did then, and this goes back to over instruction, the PDI then started to tell the pupil when there was an upcoming speed limit. Okay, look at the next sign, the speed limit's changing to 30. Look at the next sign, it's going to national speed limit. So this is over instruction. This is an experienced full license holder. They don't need telling that there's a speed limit sign, but if there's a weakness with identifying the signs, then it would be appropriate to ask proactive questions to encourage this driver to look ahead, scan, identify the change of speed limit signs and respond appropriately. So that should be done initially by asking questions. But the examiner does say that the PDI only asked a question on the last occasion for the last speed limit change throughout their Part 3 test. So therefore there wasn't really any evidence to know if learning had taken place, because what this PDI should have done is initially asked a few proactive questions to encourage this full license holder pupil to look ahead, spot the signs and respond accordingly. And then the PDI should have very simply just shifted responsibility to this full license holder pupil, withdrawn their support and said, okay, you've got this now, you're getting the hang of this, you know what you're doing, so I'm going to stop asking you questions relating to these signs. You can look for yourself and respond for yourself, because that's what the examiner wants to see. And this is the only way that learning can happen. This is the only way that learning can take place, or it's the only way that we know if learning has taken place, by actually letting the pupil have a go for themselves. Give it a go now. You can do this. Try it for yourself. Remember, this is an experienced full license holder. Now, the pupil would have benefited from a lesson on planning, is what the examiner says here, not use of mirrors. Because the examiner says this is where the pupil's weakness was. So we can take this right back to the start of the lesson. The lesson plan should have been planning, not use of mirrors. And it should have been obvious on the assessment drive or observation drive that the PDI would have given this full license holder before the Part 3, maybe a few days before the Part 3 test. It should have been pretty obvious that this full license holder had a weakness regarding planning. But why didn't the PDI pick up on this? Again, poor risk management, a lack of awareness of surroundings and the pupil's actions. Again, I can only guess, but I'm guessing based on my experience that the PDI was spending too much time just staring ahead, looking ahead, and not enough time looking at the pupil. So a lack of awareness of the pupil's actions. Because the pupil had got weaknesses in terms of identifying speed changes and traffic light changes. So it sounds like there was probably a couple of occasions where this full license holder pupil was approaching traffic lights, the lights changed to red, and the full license holder pupil just left their braking really late, probably just braked firmly at the last moment to stop the car, because it was just a lack of forward planning, a lack of anticipation. So this would have been a great lesson plan to overcome this weakness in terms of speed limit changes and traffic light changes. But again, it's got to be done, you've got to match your level of instruction to the experience and ability of the pupil. So it's quite a light touch, just initially asking well-timed, proactive questions, encouraging the pupil to look ahead, assess what's happening, decide what to do, and then act accordingly. And then once you've guided them through this on a few occasions, asking a few proactive questions, very simple questions, then just withdraw support, shift responsibility, and let them try for themselves. But that is not what this PDI did at all. And then the last thing the examiner says is, look, don't treat this full license holder pupil as if they're a learner driver. So what I'm just going to kind of rephrase this now. What the examiner is really saying is, why on earth would you tell an experienced full license holder pupil to keep slowing down to 10 or 15 miles per hour to go round a corner when, you know, if I was driving, or if you was driving, you'd go round it at maybe 25 miles per hour because it's a really nice gradual sweeping corner. But you're telling this full license holder, experienced, confident driver to slow right down to 10 miles per hour, 50 miles per hour to go round a very gradual corner. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. That isn't how I would drive, not how you would drive. So again, it's just a confused mess of a lesson, just giving the wrong advice, basically. Even if that was a novice learner driver who'd got reasonable, steering control skills, okay? So they could, we've got a novice pupil who can control the car reasonably well. Maybe they've just had a few lessons and they're going around a corner. I wouldn't be telling them to get down to 10 miles per hour. I'd be just telling them to maintain speed at maybe 20 and just go round it at 20 miles per hour, because that's realistic. All right then, so in conclusion, to wrap this up, what can you learn from this? Make sure you properly identify the pupil's learning needs. Plan a lesson around the needs of the pupil, and look for driving weaknesses, look for driving problems, and build a lesson around your pupil's driving problems and driving weaknesses. Or you could teach introduce a new topic, introduce a new subject. But in this case, because it was a full license holder, you're not teaching them anything new. You're just helping them iron out any bad habits or overcome any driving weaknesses. And then just don't over instruct. It's as simple as that. If you've got a full license holder, an experienced full license holder, it's quite a light touch. You want to give them as little kind of help as you can get away with, and just guide them where is necessary to do so. So don't spoon feed them. Don't be telling them what to do all the time. Let them drive, without your input, without your support, and only give them support where they genuinely need it to overcome a particular driving weakness or particular driving problem. And make sure that support is questions, more than likely proactive questions, encouraging them to look ahead, assess what's happening and decide what to do. But yeah, it's very, very unlikely with an experienced full license holder you'd have to be directly telling them what to do. Okay, I hope that's been helpful. Please like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. And I will see you on the next video.